Tanse, I'm Chris. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. King Charles III became the first monarch to read the throne speech since his mother, Queen Elizabeth, did in 1977. It happened this morning on the second day of his whirlwind visit to Canada. Upon arrival at the Senate building, King Charles received a 21-gun salute, and before entering the upper chamber, he inspected the Royal Guard. Immediately inside the foyer, he was greeted by the river dance drummers, and once seated, Métis fiddler Morgan Grace performed for all the dignitaries. After Grace's performance, King Charles then got up and greeted Inuit elder Ega Adagutsiak, who had lit a traditional kulik. Once the members of Parliament arrived at the Senate, he began reading the federal government plans in the upcoming session, and one part was directed specifically to Indigenous peoples.
The government will be a reliable partner to Indigenous peoples, upholding its fundamental commitment to advancing reconciliation. Central to this commitment is the creation of long-term wealth and prosperity with Indigenous peoples. For that reason, the government will double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program from $5 billion to $10 billion, enabling more Indigenous communities to become owners of major projects. As Canada moves forward with nation-building projects, the government will always be firmly guided by the principle of free, prior, and informed consent.
And we'll have more on that throne speech in our evening newscast. Meanwhile, on Parliament Hill, before the royal arrival yesterday, First Nation leaders from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba gathered to voice their displeasure that this royal visit would not include a meeting with them. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
On Monday, Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak, Métis National Council President Victoria Pruden, and Inuit Taprit Kanatami President Nate Nobed were all part of the King's official receiving line at the Ottawa airport. He also made stops at Lansdowne Park, which included doing the ceremonial face-off for an outdoor hockey game, before later traveling to Rideau Hall to meet with Governor General Mary Simon and Prime Minister Mark Carney and to plant a tree. Well, at the same time, there's a gathering of First Nations leaders on Parliament Hill. Kyra Wilson is the Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and she said First Nations leaders outside of the AFN, MNC, and ITK should be part of the King's official itinerary.
Is that we always hear about nation to nation, but when we get ready for the throne speech and where the King is going to be speaking, our leadership have not been invited in those spaces. Our leadership need to be a part of these spaces.
And Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta Grand Chief Trevor McCurdy added the exclusion is extremely disappointing.
The council, we don't have an audience with a king, and that is a problem. We have chiefs coming from all across Canada. He's flying 7 hours. Some of us flew 7 hours to be here, and some of us took a lot longer to be here. It takes time and money and effort to be here. To come this far and understand that we don't have an audience with the king is very, very disheartening.
Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations Vice Chief David Pratt said it is the King's job to remind the Prime Minister of the government's treaty obligations and commitments on reconciliation.
Meet with us, sit with our leadership, and I think we need to really have a meaningful discussion. And when he talks to Prime Minister Carney, which he does all the time as his Prime Minister, he needs to instruct him when they have those audiences and those conversations on a weekly basis to sit with our leadership and to really listen with them on implementation. Grand Chief Wilson talked there a little bit about legislation. This government committed in the past to implementing UNDRIP. They need to do that in every sector. Where's the report card?
King Charles will deliver the speech from the throne for the newly re-elected Liberal government in the Senate Tuesday morning. This will be followed by a trip to the National War Memorial. Late on Monday afternoon, the government confirmed King Charles and Camilla would be meeting with the leaders of the AFN, MNC, and ITK at the end of Monday's activities. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
As a new session of Parliament opened on Monday, just ahead of the arrival of King Charles in Ottawa, a new Speaker for the House of Commons was elected. After all members cast their votes, and as is tradition, newly elected Montreal area MP Francis Scapaleggia was dragged to the Speaker's chair by Prime Minister Mark Carney and interim opposition leader Andrew Scheer. It will be Scapaleggia's job to apply the rules and traditions of the House of Commons in an impartial manner, and that business in the House of Commons can be done in an orderly fashion. Scapaleggia is a long-time Liberal MP who was first elected to Parliament in 2004 and was one of 6 candidates vying for the job. Scapaleggia is also beat out incumbent Speaker Greg Fergus. Staying in Ottawa, the government House leader Steve McKinnon says the NDP won't be granted official party status in Parliament. The NDP only won 7 seats in the recent federal election. Parties need at least 12 seats in the House of Commons to be recognized as an official party. This means the NDP won't be allowed to ask questions daily during question period. They are not guaranteed seats on standing committees, and they'll miss out on significant funding. The party previously reached out to the Prime Minister's office to see if an exception could be made. Still, the interim leader says their MPs still have a role to play in the balance of power.
I think that we're going to be able to play a profoundly important role this Parliament. You know, we're going to be a traditional opposition party. We're going to support policies that New Democrats believe in and will oppose those that don't. And I think that there's, as in every minority parliament, a real opportunity for us to push and promote progressive policies and hold this government to account in a way that you can't do in a majority parliament.
And the last time the federal NDP party lost party status was back in 1993. With just days until the legislature in British Columbia breaks for the summer there have growing calls from Indigenous leaders for the NDP government there to hold off on a couple of controversial bills. They are designed to fast-track infrastructure projects, but as CTV's Rob Buffin reports, not everyone is on board.
There is no support for
First Nations leaders are ramping up opposition to Premier Eby's government and its controversial Bills 14 and 15, legislation aimed at fast-tracking resource and infrastructure projects.
Right now, when it comes to Bill 14 and 15, Mr. Eby is a snake oil salesman.
The bills have come under fire from the opposition, municipalities, and Indigenous leaders, citing expedited environmental approvals, excessive cabinet power, and a lack of consultation specifically with First Nations.
Just don't accept the Premier's excuses for this legislation.
Did not engage in the development of Bill 15 with the First Nations Leadership Council, as we should have. We've committed to engage in the development of the regulations with them if they choose to do that.
Despite the pushback, Eby says the bills are going ahead when voted on this Wednesday during the last week of this session.
My commitment to the First Nations Leadership Council is to work with them to demonstrate through this government's actions that we're quite serious, that we mean to use these tools to speed things up in partnership with nations.
Chief Don Tom is not impressed, citing this as a seminal moment in First Nations relations with this government.
The era of trust between the Premier Eby and First Nations chiefs is over. So the era of trust is over, and now it's based on results.
First Nations leadership promises court challenges to these laws, and Tom says he's heard from NDP MLAs not happy they're going ahead.
I'm hearing dissension amongst the party, though, that there are some within the cabinet and within the caucus.
NDP MLA Joan Phillip, herself Indigenous and married to Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, the head of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, who opposes the bills, acknowledges she's in a tough spot but supports the legislation, and her marriage is strong enough to endure.
Married for 40 years, going on 41 years, and we've known each other longer, so I think we'll weather this.
What's less clear, the strength of the relationship between the Premier and First Nations leaders going forward.
And that was CTV's Rob Buffin. The BC legislature session will wrap up on Thursday for the summer. Bills 14 and 15 will be voted on Wednesday evening and are expected to pass with support from all NDP MLAs. An additional 2 people have been charged and arrested in connection with a 2022 homicide near Whitefish Bay First Nation in northwestern Ontario. On September 4th, 2022, 45-year-old Buford Cowley was reported missing in Whitefish Bay First Nation. Both the Treaty 3 Police Service and the OPP assisted in the search for Cowley. 4 days later, police discovered human remains in the Northwest Angle No. 33 First Nation near the Manitoba border. 2 people were later charged with Cowley's death in December of 2022, but now a 24-year-old woman from Whitefish Bay has now been charged with obstructing justice and committing an indignity to a body, and a 38-year-old man from Kenora has also been charged with second-degree murder. The woman will make her next court appearance on May 29th in Kenora, while the man made his first court appearance last Friday in Kenora. Police have not released the names. The investigation continues. We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll tell you about the Métis Nation Saskatchewan election results. Stay with us. Welcome back. Nonprofit organization the Council of Yukon First Nations has announced the names of candidates running to be its next Grand Chief. 5 candidates are running for the top job. They include former Yukon Liberal MLA and current Vuntut-Gwitchin First Nation Chief Pauline Frost, former Kluane First Nation Chief Mathia Alatini, former Champagne and Eziak First Nations Chief Steve Smith, former Yukon Liberal candidate Rose Sellers, who has a background in real estate, and former Whitehorse City Councillor Ed Schultz, who previously served 2 terms as Grand Chief. Current Grand Chief Peter Johnston, who's held the position for 3 terms since 2016, is not running again. The election is scheduled to take place at the Council's General Assembly on June 25th. Over the weekend, the Métis Nation Saskatchewan held its election. Unofficial results are in, featuring both new and returning faces, with 3 recounts expected. Glenn McCollum has again won the top seat for a 3rd term as MNS president by almost 2,000 votes. Marlene Hansen has voted in as the new secretary with 1,571 votes. MNS vice president and treasurer results head to a recount with vote margins under 2%. So far, Vice President Michelle Leclerc has a slight lead over Karen Larocque, and Jeremy Denemy has an edge over Dale McCauley for treasurer. All regional leader positions are decided except Eastern Region 2, Hudson Bay, and the Nipawin area where a recount is needed. Brett Dignas received 96 votes and Nancy Duns received 94 votes. Chief Electoral Officer Gwen Lafon says turnout was strong and many are eager for the final results.
It was great to see so many Métis citizens come out and vote. We did have over 5,000 voters take part in the election. And of course, you know, we are confident with our election processes, and there's going to be a lot of steps here this week as we verify the results and look at what's going to happen next.
And the official results of the MNS election are expected to be released later this week. The Enoch Cree Nation near Edmonton held a band-only meeting last week to discuss allegations that 2 employees committed fraud. APTN's Chris Stewart reports.
The meeting was held at the River Cree Casino on Enoch Cree Nation territory Thursday afternoon. It was called by Chief and Council after questions came up of an RCMP investigation into the possible theft of as much as $1 million in band money. APTN was not allowed into the meeting and not allowed to speak to leadership or members after it was over. But a day after the meeting, Enoch Cree Nation sent APTN a statement which reads in part that the closed-door meeting was held to ensure a respectful and safe space for open dialogue. The statement also says an independent investigation is underway and Enoch Cree Nation remains committed to transparency. The RCMP has confirmed they are investigating. Meanwhile, the Enoch Cree Nation is headed into a band election scheduled for June 20th. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Ontario's proposed Bill 5 was back in Queen's Park Committee room for another round of public hearings this week. If passed, Bill 5 would create special economic zones where provincial and municipal laws, including environmental laws, could be suspended. On Monday, the committee heard from 17 groups that include environmentalists, mining advocates, and First Nation leaders. Here's APTN's Annette Francis with that story.
Grand Chief Leo Friday of the Muskegowuk Council and Grand Chief Abram Benedict of Chiefs of Ontario were the first to present, both seeking to kill the bill and draft a new one. Chief Benedict said First Nations are not against development. It's the process of pushing the bill without consultation or reference to treaties.
But I can tell you that the First Nations have never walked away from their obligation under treaty. The only person that has walked away from obligation under treaty is governments have done that, which is very, very disheartening. And so when we talk about honor, we talk about the obligations and honor of the Crown. The First Nations have continued to honor their side of the treaty, which was the agreement to use of the lands, the resources.
Later, speaking with reporters at a press conference, Ontario chiefs stood united against the bill. Hannah Sewell is a member of the Ontario Chiefs Youth Council. She's here because of her deep sense of responsibility to the health of homelands and sacred sites across Ontario.
Bill 5 doesn't protect Ontario. It protects corporate interests and short-term profits at the expense of our future generations, the air we breathe, and the water we drink. Bill 5 is an omnibus bill that guts foundational laws, some older than I am, and replaces a multi-ministry approval process with that's oversight with rushed one-step approval process.
Chief Shelley Moore-Frappier says the bill is a direct threat to their responsibilities of protecting their lands.
Time and again, we've seen our voices ignored, our rights sidelined, and our lands put at risk. If First Nations are not at the decision-making table, then don't be surprised when development stalls, projects are opposed, and the courts are forced to intervene. If this government is serious about prosperity, then it must also be serious about reconciliation, fiduciary responsibility, and shared decision-making. Because if they think they can legislate over us without consequence, they are about to learn what happens when a nation has nothing left to lose and everything to defend.
Bill 5 will be back at committee on Wednesday. In spite of what happens in Ontario's legislature, the chiefs here say they're prepared for a fight. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
We have more news after the break, including what's coming up on Face to Face with Dennis Ward later today and a new edition of Sav on the Streets. We'll be right back. Starting on East Charlottetown 17, sunny in Halifax at 13. Anujiwak 6 and sun, La Grande River 15. Quebec City 20, Saint Jovite 20. 20 in Toronto, Ottawa 25 and sun. Wawa 20, Elliott Lake 21. God's Lake 20, Thompson 17. 22 in Winnipeg and sun, Brandon 19 and partly cloudy. 18 in Regina, North Battleford 17. Uranium City 17 and sun, Buffalo Narrows 20. Grand Prairie 23 and sun, Fort McMurray 27. 27 in Lethbridge, Calgary 28. 17 in Tofino, Bella Coola 19. Smithers 15, Prince Rupert 12. 13 in Whitehorse, Dawson 16. 24 in Wrigley, Fort Simpson 23. 7 in Fort McPherson, Colville Lake 16. 13 in Whale Cove, Chesterfield 5. And Clyde River 0, Arctic Bay 2. The Hudson's Bay Company is in financial turmoil. They plan to auction off over 4,000 artifacts and art pieces to help pay their debts. First Nation leaders say it's likely not certain some of those items hold cultural and spiritual significance to First Nations peoples. Do you think the Hudson's Bay Company should auction them off or return them to the community? Sav Jones went to ask the public.
Do you think the Hudson's Bay Company should auction off artifacts of potential spiritual or cultural significance to pay off their debts or return them to their rightful First Nations communities?
They should be returning them to the communities where they got them from. I don't support that they would auction items.
Absolutely not. I think those items that were stolen from these communities should be returned to their rightful homes.
I guess both. I mean, getting things would be nice as well, you know, to bring back to communities. Yeah, I mean, bringing it to a community I think is more important for sure.
I feel like the museum would be more appropriate to give something that they bought off First Nations instead of like just selling it to other people or anything like that. Or just giving it to the First Nations would be pretty sweet.
I don't agree with it. I think they should be returned, if they can't find the family, they should look for a museum, like an Indigenous museum, because there's lots of those around now.
I don't think they should be turned into some form of profit for a company that no longer exists, a company that came in and pillaged our communities and brought diseases. So no, I don't think they should be auctioning off anything.
In our culture, nothing should be sold. It should be traded by like tobacco, medicine. That's what I believe in. That's what I've been told through my like not ancestors, hello, like I talked to them, but like my grandmas, my like elders and everyone.
They shouldn't be auctioned off to the highest bidder.
Auctioning it off doesn't even sound right. No, sorry.
Thank you, Sav. Season 11 of Face to Face comes to a close tonight. Longtime actor Billy Morasti is Dennis's guest on the season finale. After more than 40 years on the screen and stage, Morasti's career is going through a rebirth thanks to his role on the comedy series Acting Good. Morasti is proud of the show for including two-spirit characters.
It's such an important issue. I mean, it divides families. So to have a show like that features two-spirited characters, I think that can only bring the Indigenous community together. And we all need that a lot more now than we used to.
And that's your daytime newscast. Dennis Ward is back in a few hours for your evening newscast. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho kwana. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. We leave you with some sights and sounds from day one of the King and Queen visit. Ekse.
My granddaughter.
I'll be tight. I am White.